him that. I can't tell him.
You have to.
I can't. He's never gonna forgive this. How is he gonna forgive that?
She called me a liar. She called me a scammer. But she's the real scammer.
Sirens in the night, flashing lights, and Daniel's face pressed against the window of a police van. Nobody watching could believe what they were seeing. One minute he was planning a wedding. The next, he and his uncle were being led away in handcuffs, leaving Lisa standing on the curb, shaking, mascara streaked, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The news hit social media before Lisa could even process what was happening. Fans started flooding the comments, some in shock, some in denial, some already picking sides. Was this the end of another 90-day Fiancé fairy tale, or the start of something much darker? Lisa's world didn't just tilt, it spun out of control. She kept replaying the last 24 hours in her mind, searching for the moment when everything changed. But all she could remember was the look on Daniel's face. Confused, betrayed, maybe even scared. And honestly, who wouldn't be? One day you're talking about honeymoon destinations. The next you're answering questions in a police station, your uncle beside you. Both of you accused of something you can't even say out loud yet. If you're new here, I'm Oliva, and this is Reality Sport, where we don't just watch the drama, we break it down, roast the behavior, and ask the questions everyone else is too scared to say out loud. Hit that subscribe button if you want the real story, and drop your wildest theory in the comments, because trust me, you're going to have a lot of questions by the end of this one. But let's rewind for a second. Before the sirens, before the accusations, before Lisa's world exploded, there was a love story that looked almost too perfect. Daniel and Lisa met online, and within weeks they were finishing each other's sentences, sending heart emojis across continents, and making plans that most couples wouldn't dare whisper out loud until at least the 1-year mark. Daniel was charming, attentive, always ready with a compliment or a joke, and Lisa? Well, Lisa was glowing. Her friends said she looked 10 years younger, her family started asking when they'd get to meet this mystery man, and even the most cynical viewers had to admit the chemistry was real. Or at least, it looked real. Because if you watch closely, there were moments, tiny, almost invisible cracks in the surface, where Daniel's smile slipped, or Lisa's eyes darted away just a little too quickly. Maybe it was nerves, maybe it was the pressure of cameras, or maybe it was something else entirely. The first time Daniel's uncle appeared on screen, he seemed harmless enough. A little old-fashioned, maybe, but supportive. He talked about family, tradition, the importance of building a strong foundation before marriage. Lisa nodded along, eager to fit in, eager to believe that this was all part of the adventure. But now, with Daniel and his uncle in custody, every word, every gesture, every awkward pause suddenly felt loaded with meaning. Fans started combing through old episodes, looking for clues they might have missed. Was Daniel always this eager to talk about money? Did his uncle push too hard for joint investments? Or was Lisa seeing ghosts where there were none? Nobody knew for sure. But one thing was clear. Something happened that made Lisa go from planning a wedding to calling the police. What did she find? Was it a message? A document? A whispered conversation she wasn't supposed to hear? The only thing more shocking than the arrest was the silence that followed. Daniel's social media went dark. Lisa stopped answering calls. The production team issued a statement, but it was vague, almost nervous. And the fans? They were left with nothing but questions, theories, and a growing sense that the real story was only just beginning. It started with a late-night message and a profile picture that made Lisa pause. Daniel's smile was easy, his words even easier, and before she knew it, their chats stretched from midnight to sunrise. The distance between them shrank with every call. Lisa would prop her phone against a coffee mug, hair in a messy bun, laughing at Daniel's stories about growing up, his dreams, his plans for the future. He listened too. Really listened. Or at least, he made her feel like he did. He remembered her favorite color, the name of her childhood dog, the way she took her coffee. For the first time in years, Lisa felt seen, and she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. The video calls turned into daily rituals. Daniel would call her before work, after dinner, sometimes even in the middle of the night just to say he missed her. He sent her songs, poems, little videos of his family's Sunday dinners. Lisa's friends teased her about the time difference. But she didn't care. She was falling. And she wasn't alone. Daniel was quick with compliments, always telling her how beautiful she looked, how lucky he felt, how he couldn't wait to show her his world. He talked about marriage early. Maybe too early, but Lisa brushed it off as excitement. After all, when you know, right? It wasn't long before Daniel wanted Lisa to meet his family. The first call with his uncle was awkward, but sweet. The uncle asked about her job, her family, her plans for the future. He talked about tradition, about how important it was for Daniel to find a partner who respected their values. Lisa felt flattered, even honored, to be included so soon. She told her friends it felt like a sign, like everything was moving in the right direction. The pace was fast, but the feelings felt genuine. Daniel's family welcomed her, at least on camera, and Lisa's own family started to warm up to the idea that this could be more than a fling. Looking back, there were moments that might have raised eyebrows. The way Daniel sometimes changed the subject when money came up, or how his uncle seemed a little too interested in Lisa's job and savings. But Lisa was caught up in the rush, swept along by the attention and the hope that this was her second chance at happiness. She told herself not to overthink it. After all, every relationship has its quirks, and who wants to ruin a fairy tale by looking for monsters under the bed? Still, the question lingers, why did Lisa ignore the first red flags, and what would it take for her to finally see them? The first time Daniel brought up money, it sounded innocent enough. He joked about how expensive weddings could get, how they'd need to start saving if they wanted a big celebration. Lisa laughed, thinking he was being practical. She liked that he was planning ahead, that he saw a future with her. But soon, those little jokes turned into longer conversations. Daniel started asking about her job, her salary, what kind of house she wanted, whether she'd be open to investing in a business together once she moved. He talked about building a life, not just a romance, and Lisa felt flattered that he wanted her involved in every detail. Daniel's uncle started joining more of their calls. At first, he was quiet, just listening. But then he began steering the conversation. He'd ask Lisa about her financial goals, her thoughts on joint accounts, even her credit score. He explained that in their culture, families often planned finances together before marriage, that it was a sign of respect and commitment. Lisa wanted to be open-minded. She'd read enough about international relationships to know that things could be different, and she didn't want to seem suspicious or closed off. She told herself this was all part of blending two lives, two families, two sets of expectations. But Lisa's friends weren't convinced. They started asking questions she didn't want to answer. Why was Daniel so interested in her savings? Why did his uncle care about her assets? Wasn't it a little soon to be talking about joint investments when they hadn't even set a wedding date? Lisa brushed off their concerns, insisting that Daniel was just being responsible, that his uncle was looking out for him. She trusted Daniel, and she wanted her friends to trust him too. She told herself that love meant taking risks, that every relationship required a leap of faith. Still, the questions kept coming, and Lisa found herself defending Daniel more and more. She wanted to believe that his intentions were pure, that his family was simply trying to welcome her in their own way. But late at night, when the calls ended and the house was quiet, she sometimes wondered if she was being naive. What if the person you trust most is hiding the biggest secret? Lisa never meant to listen in. She was walking past the guest room, phone in hand, when she heard Daniel's voice, low, urgent, not meant for her. She paused, just for a second, thinking maybe he was talking to a friend or his uncle about something harmless. But then she caught a phrase that made her freeze. We need to secure her assets quickly, before she changes her mind. The words hit her like a slap. Her stomach dropped, her mind raced, and suddenly every sweet moment, every promise, every late-night confession felt like it was teetering on the edge of a lie. She stood there, barely breathing, afraid to move, afraid to hear more. Daniel's uncle replied, his tone serious, but the words blurred together. Lisa's heart pounded so loudly she could barely make out the rest. She backed away, her hands shaking, her mind spinning with questions she didn't want to ask. Was this what her friends had warned her about? Was she the only one who hadn't seen it coming? She wanted to believe she'd misunderstood, that maybe they were talking about something else, something innocent. But the phrase kept echoing in her head, impossible to ignore. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation she'd ever had with Daniel. She scrolled through old messages, looking for signs she'd missed, hints that things weren't what they seemed. She remembered the first time he'd asked about her savings, the way his uncle had pressed her about joint accounts, the sudden urgency in their voices when they talked about the future. Had it all been a setup? Or was she letting her fears get the best of her? She wanted to confront Daniel, to demand an explanation. But she was scared of what he might say. What if he lied? What if he told the truth? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her question everything she thought she knew. She wondered if she was being paranoid, if she was reading too much into a single sentence. But deep down, she knew something had changed. The trust she'd built, the hope she'd clung to, all of it felt fragile now, like it could shatter with one wrong word. Did Lisa mishear, or was this the moment everything she believed about Daniel was about to fall apart? Lisa couldn't keep it in any longer. The next morning, her nerves were raw, her patience gone. She waited until Daniel came into the kitchen, acting like nothing had changed, smiling as he poured coffee and asked if she wanted breakfast. She watched him, searching his face for any sign of guilt, any flicker of the man she thought she knew. Her voice shook as she asked him straight out, "What were you and your uncle talking about last night?" Daniel's smile faded. He looked confused at first, then defensive, then angry. He asked what she meant, why she was asking, what she thought she'd heard. Lisa didn't back down. She repeated the words she'd heard, her voice louder now, her hands clenched tight around her phone. "I heard you say you needed to secure my assets quickly. What does that mean, Daniel? Why are you talking about my money behind my back?" The room went cold. Daniel's uncle appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. He tried to calm things down, speaking softly, explaining that in their culture, families discuss finances before marriage, that it's normal to plan for the future, to make sure everyone is protected. He said Lisa was overreacting, that she was misunderstanding their intentions. Daniel jumped in, insisting he loved her, that he would never hurt her, that everything he'd said about their future was real. But Lisa couldn't hear any of it. All she could think about was that one sentence, the urgency in Daniel's voice, the way his uncle had nodded along. She felt trapped, cornered, like she was being gaslit in her own relationship. The argument spiraled. Lisa demanded to see messages, documents, anything that would prove Daniel wasn't trying to take advantage of her. Daniel pushed back, saying she was being paranoid, that she was letting her friends poison her mind. His uncle grew frustrated, raising his voice, telling Lisa she needed to trust the family if she wanted to be part of it. The more they insisted, the more Lisa pulled away. She felt the ground shifting under her feet, the foundation of trust cracking with every word. She remembered all the times she defended Daniel to her friends, all the times she told herself to ignore the red flags. Now, faced with the truth, she couldn't ignore them anymore. Lisa's emotions boiled over. She accused Daniel of using her, of planning to take her money and leave her stranded. Daniel shouted back, saying she was insulting him, that she didn't understand his culture, that she was making a mistake. His uncle tried to mediate, but the damage was done. The room was filled with anger, hurt, and betrayal. Lisa's voice broke as she told Daniel she didn't know who he was anymore. Daniel's eyes flashed with pain, but he didn't reach for her. He stood his ground, insisting he'd done nothing wrong, that she was the one destroying their relationship. The fight dragged on, neither side willing to give an inch. Lisa demanded answers. Daniel offered explanations. But nothing he said could put the pieces back together. The trust that once held them close was gone, replaced by suspicion and resentment. Lisa realized she couldn't stay. Not when every word felt like a lie. Not when every promise sounded hollow. She packed a bag, her hands shaking, her heart pounding, and walked out the door, leaving Daniel and his uncle standing in the ruins of what used to be their future. When trust breaks, does love stand a chance? The silence that followed Lisa's departure was louder than any argument. Daniel and his uncle sat in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair, the untouched coffee, the life that had slipped through their fingers. Lisa walked down the street, tears streaming down her face, wondering if she'd ever be able to trust anyone again. The story wasn't over, but the fairy tale was finished. Now, all that was left was the fallout. Lisa's hands trembled as she scrolled through her phone, screenshotting every message, every bank transfer suggestion, every conversation that now felt suspicious in hindsight. She opened her laptop and started a document, typing out dates, times, and details she'd never thought she'd need to remember. The first time Daniel asked about her savings. The night his uncle pressed her about joint accounts. The moment she overheard that conversation in the hallway. Each memory stung, but she forced herself to keep going, determined not to let her emotions cloud the facts. She saved voice notes, flagged emails, and even wrote down things she remembered from calls that hadn't been recorded. It felt surreal, like she was building a case against someone she'd once planned to marry. The decision to go to the police didn't come easily. Lisa sat in her hotel room for hours, staring at her phone, replaying the confrontation over and over in her mind. She thought about calling her family, but she didn't want to hear "I told you so." She thought about flying home, but something inside her refused to run. She wanted answers, and she wanted to protect herself. So she gathered her evidence, put on her bravest face, and walked into the local police station. The officer behind the desk listened patiently as she explained her story, showing him the screenshots, the messages, the notes she'd made. He asked questions, took copies, and told her they would investigate. Lisa left the station feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time, relieved to have taken action, but terrified about what would happen next. It didn't take long for the story to explode. Word spread quickly, first among the production crew, then to the wider cast, and finally to the fans. Social media lit up with speculation. Some people rushed to support Lisa, calling her brave for standing up for herself, for refusing to be taken advantage of. Others accused her of overreacting, of misunderstanding cultural differences, of trying to ruin Daniel's life out of spite. Hashtags trended, old clips resurfaced, and armchair detectives picked apart every episode, looking for signs they'd missed. Was Daniel always this calculating? Did his uncle have a hidden agenda? Or was Lisa reading too much into innocent conversations? Daniel's family didn't stay silent. His uncle gave a statement to the local press, insisting that everything had been above board, that Lisa was twisting the truth to fit her own narrative. He said their family had welcomed her, respected her, and only wanted what was best for Daniel. He pointed to their culture, where families are deeply involved in marriage planning, where financial discussions are a sign of trust, not manipulation. Daniel himself posted a video, his eyes red, his voice shaking, denying any wrongdoing. He said he loved Lisa, that he'd never tried to scam her, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by outsiders who didn't understand their relationship. The production team found themselves in the middle of a storm. They reviewed hours of footage, trying to decide what could be aired and what needed to be kept private while the investigation played out. Editors combed through scenes, looking for anything that might be used as evidence, anything that might sway public opinion one way or the other. Some moments that once seemed sweet now looked suspicious. Other scenes that felt tense in the moment now seemed harmless in comparison to what had come after. The show's official account released a carefully worded statement promising to cooperate with authorities and respect everyone's privacy. But fans weren't satisfied. They wanted answers, and they wanted them now. Lisa watched the chaos unfold from her hotel room, feeling both vindicated and exposed. She read the comments, the messages of support, the accusations, the threats. She wondered if she'd done the right thing, if she'd made a mistake, if she'd ever be able to move past this. She missed Daniel, or at least the version of him she thought she knew. She missed the feeling of being loved, of being chosen, of believing in a future that now seemed impossible. But she also knew she couldn't ignore what she'd heard, what she'd seen, what she felt in her gut. She had to protect herself, even if it meant losing everything she'd hoped for. Meanwhile, Daniel's world was falling apart. His family rallied around him, insisting he was innocent, that Lisa was confused or manipulated by outsiders. He tried to reach out to her, but she didn't answer. He posted on social media, trying to clear his name, but every post only seemed to fuel the fire. Fans took sides, friendships fractured, and the once bright promise of a new life together faded into a mess of accusations and doubt. Is this a scam? Or a tragic misunderstanding? The evidence was piling up, but the truth felt further away than ever. Both sides were digging in, refusing to back down, and the world was watching, waiting for the next twist in a story that had already gone further than anyone could have imagined. The investigation moved quickly, but for everyone involved, it felt like time had slowed to a crawl. Police officers started calling in witnesses, collecting statements, and requesting every scrap of digital evidence Lisa could provide. They wanted to see the messages, the call logs, the emails, the bank statements, anything that might show whether Daniel and his uncle had planned something more than a wedding. Lisa handed over her phone, her laptop, even her travel documents, answering every question as best she could. She tried to stay calm, but the reality of being alone in a foreign country, surrounded by strangers, with her entire relationship under a microscope, was almost too much to bear. She missed home, missed her friends, missed the days when her biggest worry was whether Daniel would call her before bed. Meanwhile, the producers of the show were scrambling behind the scenes. They knew the cameras had captured hours of footage, some of it sweet, some of it tense, all of it now potential evidence. Editors were pulled off other projects and told to review every second of Daniel and Lisa's story, looking for anything that might help the investigation or protect the network from legal fallout. Scenes that once seemed harmless were now loaded with new meaning. A casual conversation about joint bank accounts. A family dinner where Daniel's uncle asked Lisa about her job. A late-night walk where Daniel mentioned wanting to build a future together. Every word, every glance, every awkward silence was dissected, debated, and catalogued. The police wanted context, not just content. They asked about cultural traditions, about how marriages are arranged in Daniel's family, about whether it was normal for uncles to be so involved in financial planning. Lisa tried to explain what she'd experienced, but she worried that her answers sounded naive or biased. She didn't want to insult Daniel's culture, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The investigators pressed her for details, asking when the financial conversation started, whether Daniel had ever pressured her to send money, whether she'd felt threatened or manipulated. Lisa answered honestly, but the more she talked, the more she realized how blurry the line was between love and suspicion. Daniel, for his part, was fighting his own battle. He went on local radio, gave interviews to bloggers, and posted long explanations on social media. He insisted that he loved Lisa, that his family had only wanted to welcome her, that the talk about money was normal in their community. He said Lisa had misunderstood, that she'd let outsiders fill her head with doubts, that she was throwing away something beautiful because she couldn't trust him. His uncle backed him up, repeating the same points, sometimes getting emotional, sometimes getting angry. They both said they'd never tried to scam anyone, that the idea was insulting, that Lisa was the one who changed. The fans were split down the middle. Some believed Lisa, pointing to the urgency in Daniel's voice, the way his uncle kept steering the conversation back to money, the fact that Lisa had documented everything so carefully. Others sided with Daniel, arguing that Lisa was overreacting, that she didn't understand the culture, that she was looking for problems where there were none. Social media became a battleground, with hashtags trending, old clips resurfacing, and everyone convinced they knew the real story. Lisa felt more alone than ever. She stayed in her hotel room, afraid to go out, afraid to check her phone, afraid of what people might say if they recognized her. She missed Daniel, missed the feeling of being loved, missed the hope she'd felt when she first arrived. But she also knew she couldn't ignore what she'd heard, what she'd seen, what she felt in her gut. She wondered if she'd ever be able to trust anyone again, if she'd ever be able to move past this, if she'd made a terrible mistake by coming forward. The investigation dragged on, with no easy answers. The police kept digging, the producers kept reviewing footage, and the world kept watching. Would you risk everything for the truth, even if it means losing love? Lisa had, and now she was living with the consequences. Daniel had too, in his own way, and now his reputation, his family, and his future were all on the line. The truth was out there somewhere, but finding it meant tearing apart everything they'd built together, piece by painful piece. And as the days turned into weeks, it became clear that no matter what the investigation found, nothing would ever be the same. Lisa's suitcase sat open on the bed, half-packed, clothes folded with shaky hands, her passport tucked into the side pocket like a lifeline. The hotel room felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in with every hour she spent waiting for news, for closure, for some sign that this nightmare would end. She stared out the window at the city below, the noise and chaos of Lagos, a world away from the quiet heartbreak inside her chest. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. But it was never the message she wanted. No apology, no confession, no miracle fix. Only updates from the embassy, reminders from the airline, and a steady stream of notifications from people she barely knew, all with opinions about her life. The decision to leave Nigeria wasn't easy. Lisa had come here with hope, with dreams, with a suitcase full of wedding clothes, and a heart wide open. Now she was leaving with more questions than answers, her trust shattered, her future uncertain. She booked her flight in the middle of the night, unable to sleep, unable to face another day of waiting. She didn't tell Daniel. She didn't tell his uncle. She didn't even tell her friends until she was already at the airport, her boarding pass in hand, her eyes red from crying. The drive to the airport was silent, the city lights blaring past the window as she tried to hold herself together. She kept replaying the last conversation with Daniel in her mind, the anger, the accusations, the way his voice broke when he realized she was leaving. She wondered if he'd ever forgive her, if she'd ever forgive herself. Back in the United States, everything felt different. The air was colder, the sky grayer, the world somehow smaller. Lisa's friends met her at the airport, hugging her tight, whispering that she'd done the right thing, that she was safe now, that she could start over. But Lisa didn't feel safe. She felt exposed, raw, like everyone was watching her, waiting for her to fall apart. She tried to settle back into her old life, but nothing fit the way it used to. Her apartment felt empty, her job felt pointless, her phone felt heavier with every message she didn't answer. She scrolled through social media, watching the story play out in real time, strangers dissecting her choices, her motives, her heart. The investigation in Nigeria didn't stop just because Lisa left. The police kept calling, asking for more information, more documents, more proof. Daniel's family hired a lawyer, pushing back against the accusations, insisting that Lisa was lying, that she was trying to ruin Daniel's life out of spite. Daniel posted a long video, tears streaming down his face, begging Lisa to come back, to talk to him, to believe in him one more time. His uncle went on local radio, defending their family, accusing Lisa of misunderstanding everything, of letting outsiders poison her mind. The production team released another statement, promising to support both sides, to respect the legal process, to protect everyone's privacy. But the damage was done. The story was out, and nobody could control it anymore. Fans took sides, and the internet turned into a war zone. Some people called Lisa a hero, a survivor, a woman brave enough to stand up for herself in a world that too often punishes women for speaking out. Others called her a liar, a manipulator, a foreigner who didn't understand the culture she was marrying into. Old clips from the show resurfaced, every awkward moment dissected, every smile questioned, every word twisted to fit someone's theory. Hashtags trended, memes spread, and Lisa's inbox filled with messages, some kind, some cruel, all demanding answers she didn't have. Lisa's friends tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she couldn't escape the feeling that her life was no longer her own. She missed Daniel, missed the way he made her laugh, missed the feeling of being loved, of being chosen. But she also remembered the fear, the doubt, the way her heart raced when she overheard that conversation. She wondered if she'd ever be able to trust anyone again, if she'd ever be able to love without looking over her shoulder. She started seeing a therapist, hoping to make sense of the mess, to find some way to move forward. But every session brought more questions than answers, more pain than peace. Daniel, for his part, refused to back down. He kept fighting, kept posting, kept insisting that he was innocent, that Lisa had misunderstood everything. His family stood by him, their voices growing louder, their accusations sharper. They threatened legal action, demanded apologies, tried to rally support from their community. Daniel's friends reached out to Lisa, some begging her to reconsider, others warning her to stay away. The lines were drawn, and nobody seemed willing to cross them. The investigation dragged on, the outcome uncertain. Both sides dug in, refusing to admit fault, refusing to let go. The show's producers tried to keep the peace, but even they couldn't stop the story from spiraling out of control. Lisa watched from afar, her heart breaking all over again every time a new headline appeared. Every time a stranger sent her a message. Every time she remembered what she'd lost. Can either of them recover from this? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Lisa tried to rebuild her life and Daniel tried to clear his name. The love story that had once seemed so perfect was now a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of trust, the risks of hope, and the price of believing in something that might never have been real. Lisa tried to settle back into her old routines, but nothing felt the same. She'd walk through her apartment and catch herself reaching for her phone, half expecting a message from Daniel, then remembering why the silence was there. Friends invited her out, tried to distract her, but she found herself drifting, replaying every moment, every warning she'd brushed aside. Trust didn't come easy anymore. Even small talk with strangers felt loaded, every new connection shadowed by doubt. She started journaling, hoping to make sense of what happened, but some days the words wouldn't come. The pain was still too fresh, the questions too heavy. Daniel's world had changed too. His reputation took a hit, whispers followed him everywhere, and even those who believed him started to keep their distance. His uncle, once so vocal, grew quiet, avoiding interviews and letting lawyers handle the fallout. The legal case dragged on, no clear answers, no closure for anyone. Daniel posted less, his messages more guarded, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. He said he missed Lisa, that he wished things had gone differently, but the damage was done. Both of them were left with scars no one else could see. For anyone watching, the lesson was clear. Love can be blinding, hope can make you ignore the obvious, and trust, once broken, takes more than apologies to repair. If you ever find yourself in a whirlwind romance, pay attention to the details, listen to your gut, and don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Protect your heart, but protect your future too. What would you do if your love story turned into a legal nightmare? Sometimes, the hardest part isn't losing someone, it's learning to trust yourself again. The question that started it all still hangs in the air, heavier than ever. Was Lisa the victim of a carefully planned scam? Or did she misread a culture, a family, and a man who genuinely wanted her in his life? The evidence never gave a clear answer. Every message, every conversation, every awkward pause from those early video calls now feels like a clue. But none of them fit together perfectly. Remember the first time Daniel's uncle asked about Lisa's job? At the time, it sounded like small talk, maybe even a compliment. Now, it's impossible not to wonder if it was the first chess move in a much bigger game. Or maybe it was nothing more than a protective uncle, worried about his nephew's future, trying to make sure Daniel wasn't being taken advantage of himself. Lisa's friends replayed every warning they'd given her, every raised eyebrow, every "are you sure?" that she'd brushed aside. Daniel's family pointed to every tradition, every family meeting, every time they'd welcome Lisa into their home and called her one of their own. The show's fans split into camps, some convinced Lisa had saved herself from disaster, others sure she destroyed a good man's life over a misunderstanding. The truth, as always, is messier than any headline or hashtag. For Lisa, the pain didn't end when she stepped off the plane. She still wakes up some nights, heart pounding, convinced she's missed something obvious. She wonders if she'll ever be able to trust her own judgment again, if she'll ever let herself fall in love without second-guessing every word, every gesture. For Daniel, the fallout is just as real. He lost more than a fiancé. He lost his reputation, his peace, and maybe even his faith in love. His uncle, once the family's anchor, now avoids the spotlight, his silence saying more than any statement ever could. If you've watched this far, you know there are no easy answers. Sometimes love stories don't end with a wedding or a breakup. They end with questions that never get answered, with wounds that never fully heal. Maybe Lisa was right to trust her instincts, to protect herself when things didn't add up. Maybe Daniel was telling the truth, and the real tragedy is how quickly trust can turn to suspicion when money and culture collide. Either way, both of them are left picking up the pieces, trying to rebuild lives that will never look the same. So what's the takeaway? If you're ever swept up in a romance that feels too good to be true, don't ignore the details. Ask the hard questions, even if you're afraid of the answers. Listen to your friends, but also listen to yourself. And if you ever find yourself standing at a crossroads, wondering if you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life, remember, it's better to pause and protect your future than to rush and regret it later. But if you think this was the wildest 90-day fiancé scandal, you haven't seen anything yet. There's another story brewing, one with even more secrets, more twists, and a reveal that left everyone speechless. If you want to know how a simple lie turned into an international incident, you'll want to stick around for the next episode. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next.